But first, this afternoon, the Prime Minister, well, he dug a distinct signpost into the ground on Australia's battle against COVID-19. He clearly signalled that the worst is over, without, of course, daring to utter those words. And we need to rebuild towards what we now regard as normal.
We can't overstate this success, but it is pleasing to know that it is estimated more than half of those who've contracted the coronavirus in Australia have actually overcome it. And that is also good news.
Now, he's got the poker face on. He's giving us the statistics dryly, but that's a PM who I reckon is almost busting with glee, busting to tell us how close we're getting to nailing this virus, better than any nation on earth. If you go through the realm of statistics that the Chief Medical Officer, Brendan Murphy, did earlier today, Australia is basically leading the world. And in terms of what the Prime Minister is thinking at the moment, it's not a hunch that I say that he'd be busting with glee. It's in the data. He's talking in terms of making changes in 4 weeks in this country because of the medical data. And this is the medical data that he and the Chief Medical Team have been poring over in order to determine when we'd reached the peak and seen the worst of this nightmare. I would argue tonight that we have hit that peak, that peak, that worst-case scenario, occurred 7 days ago. And this is why. We have got fewer in ICU. We are seeing fewer deaths this week than for a long time. And the curve of cases is flattening solidly. Less than 20 cases nationally today in total. But more than that, there is a crucial comparative measurement which the media, the politicians, the medics, and you and I have not been focusing on. We're not led to compare these figures, but I want to lead you there tonight. It is the number of net infections, current cases, not old ones, versus recovering cases. Now, for instance, at the beginning of this month, we were still on the edge of seeing large national infection numbers, between 100 and 200, with fewer numbers recovering. But let me show you 2 graphs on the official COVID Live website. These are crucial. It is the national infection numbers over the past week. The average, 51 per day. And then there's this table. It's the national recovery numbers over the past week. Recovery. The average, 106 per day. You think about what that means. Even if you add, say, another 20 infections for the fact that fewer tests were conducted over Easter, say we do that, we are still seeing way more recoveries in Australia this past week than infections. In fact, as the PM said himself today, we have more recovered than infected now. It wasn't some kind of fluke that he mentions this. And at this rate, you think about one going up and the other coming down, theoretically taking out a few days for infection spikes as well, we'll be at 0 before the end of June. OK, I know you're saying it's just a model, but it is a consistent trend for the past week and a crucial model the public isn't alerted to too often. The medics have all this detail. And this was CMO Brendan Murphy today on recoveries and how they now define a recovery.
Recovery, we have stopped doing clearance testing after people have recovered. So a recovery, people are allowed out of isolation 2 weeks after diagnosis if they've been completely symptom-free for 72 hours.
So in light of all of that, we get the hint from the Prime Minister today that some restrictions are likely to be lifted late May. This is 4 weeks from now when the National Cabinet will talk about reversing the restrictions in the same way they were imposed, so backwards. So cafes, restaurants, pubs, back open, and we go along the scale backwards from the way we went. As for schools, he and the Premiers are clearly deadlocked. They don't agree. Despite the fact that when New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian recommended that kids stay at home, it was March 23, we had 360 new cases that day. That was March 23, and she reiterated that 24. Well, now we've had less than 20 today. Less than 50 nationally for the entire week. Why hold back? In Iceland, which has worse numbers than Australia right now, it's reopening schools right now. Germany, which did well, but their death rate is horrific and they have more daily infections than Australia, they are reopening their schools as well. My contention is this: the virus bell curve has peaked. We are well on our way to recovery. Our schools should be open and they should be full next week. Children are negligible victims. They're negligible carriers of this particular virus, not influenza, of this virus. The PM spoke about the staff room being the problem today.
This virus behaves very different with children than it does with adults. And for children, the health advice has been very clear that schools are a safe place for students to be. I think where the confusion arises is that for teachers, they are more likely to teachers are more at risk in the staff room than they are in the classroom.
Anyone that tells you any different to that is being unreasonably safe. You think about it. When we closed down most of our schools or said you should stay at home, 360 cases per day. Today, nationally, we had less than 20. And it's a consistent trend. It's not out of the blue, which raises questions about this so-called 6-month crisis. It won't be 6 months. And yet we've spent and will continue to spend more than $300 billion to prop up business and pay for those out of work. Now, the rescue operation was way over the top. We're paying money to people who simply have to quarantine because they lost half of their holidays. That's what we're doing. Really? There are some casuals who earn $700 a fortnight who can qualify to earn $1,500 a fortnight. But to be fair, nothing is perfect, especially something we've never experienced before. The Prime Minister, the Treasurer, they did more than what was required as an insurance policy against what may have been a much worse scenario. We are on the way to recovery, folks. The Prime Minister won't say that. We've got 4 hard weeks to go before the lockdowns are partially lifted. And won't we appreciate the simple things of life again?